Let me share my tale with you. My name is Liam, and when we were both only teens, Ruby and I fell in love. We couldn't wait to start our life together when we got married at age 20, but I always felt like there was something missing. The idea of not finishing my degree always lingered in the back of my mind when I dropped out of college to start working and support my young wife. I decided to continue what I had started by returning to college part-time. When we learned we were having a kid, we were over the moon, but with a baby on the way, I felt even more pressure to complete my degree. I wished for the best future for my family. Our son, Ethan, made his entrance into the world just as I embarked on my final year of college. Balancing the demands of parenthood and academics was challenging. I was employed as a store stalker from the early hours of 4 a.m. to 8 a.m., after which I transitioned to my full-time role as an administrative officer at the local police department from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Tuesdays involved taking classes from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., while Saturdays involved additional classes from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. But despite the time-consuming schedule, I was determined to make it all work. Ruby, on the other hand, was a nurse's aide at a nearby hospital, working her shift from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. Fortunately, my mother lived just a brief 15-minute drive from our workplace and school, ensuring that Ethan had ample care. Although it was a challenging period, we managed to support one another throughout. The D-Day was the weekend before, wherein Ruby and I had been arguing constantly. She was disappointed that I was not willing to set aside my studies temporarily to dedicate more time to her and our child. She had been criticizing my work and studies, which had a negative impact on our relationship. It had been 2 months since we were last intimate, and the situation reached a boiling point one Monday evening. I was engrossed in fact-checking for a research paper I had finished over the weekend with a deadline the upcoming Tuesday evening. Ruby had been provoking conflicts. Ultimately, I urged her to be quiet and cease behaving childishly. Her reply left me utterly stunned. Faced with unwavering eye contact, she declared, "I despise you and I'm in love with someone else." But the sheer shock of her words rendered me speechless. We found ourselves embroiled in a heated argument for hours until Ruby eventually revealed the truth. It appears that she had developed an emotional connection with a janitor at the hospital where she served as a nurse's aide. Initially, their interactions were quite innocent, involving compliments and casual lunch meetings in the hospital cafeteria. However, the situation quickly spiraled out of control. She began speaking negatively of me and even engaged in secret kisses with this individual. The revelation broke my heart. My entire world had fallen apart. How the lady I loved could have hurt me in such a way was beyond my comprehension. I decided to leave because I thought my entire life had been a lie. I returned to the living room, suitcase in hand, and silently passed by her. She kept asking me where I was going and made fun of me by saying I should be heading back to Mommy. I left the luggage in the driveway and entered again to get her handbag. I extended it to her and told her to leave. She was stunned and refused to leave. I took her upstairs, carefully placed her over my shoulder, and brought her outside to the hood of the car. She stood there utterly stunned, making no effort to resist as I returned to the house and secured the door with a lock. Although she made attempts to re-enter, I maintained a firm grip on the deadbolt, and eventually she gave up and left to stay with her parents. She informed them that we were going through a separation, but kept the true reason concealed. That night seemed interminable, and I had to make the difficult calls to both of my employers, explaining the family emergency that required me to take the following day off. At a certain juncture, weariness consumed me, and I succumbed to slumber. My strategy was clear. I aimed to rouse myself at 7 this morning, with my thoughts preoccupied by the need to limit interactions with Ruby, my impending ex-spouse. Our situation had been steadily worsening, and I understood the urgency of taking swift action to prevent further complications. Just when I contacted my mom to see if she could keep our son for the day, she seemed concerned and inquired as to why the boy wasn't already with us. I went immediately to the office of Mr. Parker, a family friend who is a lawyer, after dropping off my son at my mother's. I laid out the details of the situation, seeking his assistance in initiating the divorce process without delay. Mr. Parker attentively listened and recommended I consider my decision, but I was resolute. In my desire to have the divorce paperwork finalized that very day. He eventually conceded to assist and assured me that the papers would be prepared by day's end. I assured Mr. Parker that I would collect the documents and personally submit them to the clerk's office. Stepping out of his office, a wave of relief swept over me. At last, I was seizing command of my life and making the necessary choices. I was well aware that the path ahead would be challenging, but I was determined to see it through. After my workday, I returned home, took a shower, and shared a breakfast with my son and sister. To the crushly too late readers, and the day I received a call from Ruby, wanting to make arrangements to see our son. Her tone was irate and confrontational as she insisted on taking him for the weekend. I refused and instead suggested meeting on Sunday at a nearby park. In response, Ruby abruptly ended the call. I reported to my job at the police department, yet the disquiet from my conversation with Ruby continued to linger. I made my way to the clerk's office to initiate the divorce proceedings. In the course of the day, a co-worker from the office informed me that the divorce papers were prepared and ready to be delivered to Ruby at her workplace. I contacted an acquaintance and requested that he deliver the documents to Ruby while she was at her workplace. He agreed to carry out this task on the following day.
They couldn't share lunch or arrange an evening meeting, as the janitor explained that he had a commitment related to one of his children.
Ruby returned to work after our phone call and was approached by her janitor, who chatted with her throughout the day. After her work shift, Ruby visited her parents' house. That evening, she made 3 calls to me, but I disconnected each time.
Mrs. Ruby, you're facing a divorce lawsuit on the grounds of infidelity. He hurried to her side to offer assistance.
Oh, she was in shock that she allowed this to occur.
Mr. Parker gently lifted her and settled her in a nearby chair. Calvin made every effort to soothe her, but it took some time for her to regain her composure. Lifetiming my wife was almost done with her shift when she received a call to meet the hospital administrator in her office. Anxiety gripped her as she feared that someone might have reported her outburst. She cautiously entered the administrator's office, and to her shock, as soon as the door closed, she was met with a sudden and unexpected termination. Can you picture the expression on her face? It was absolutely unforgettable. They even informed her not to bother returning to the premises. I suppose she won't be intertwining work and personal matters again, will she? And to top it all off, her last paycheck will be sent by mail. As it turns out, someone had observed the affair in the parking lot and reported it. The tale of the divorce papers had swiftly circulated throughout the hospital, leading to the immediate dismissal of the janitor, who had been promptly escorted off the premises just an hour prior. The scandalous news had erupted through the hospital like a wildfire, and my wife felt as though everyone was aware of her abrupt departure from the hospital. She left without explaining the situation to her colleagues, only mentioning that we were now separated, and she headed straight to her parents' house. Seated at the dinner table with my son, I relished a serene evening at home. Reflecting on the day's occurrences, a sense of contentment washed over me. I couldn't deny the gratification I felt upon learning about the janitor's termination, given his role in the scandal. My contemplations were abruptly interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Rising from my seat, I opened it to find a visibly pregnant woman who appeared to be struggling to maintain an upright posture. She inquired about my wife, Ruby, to which I had to convey that she no longer resided with me. This in response to her next question about whether I was Ruby's husband. I acknowledged that I was and revealed that I had served her with divorce papers earlier that day.
The woman revealed her identity as the janitor's wife and began to explain what had occurred in the hospital.
The unsettling specifics she divulged regarding my wife's extramarital involvement and the undisclosed location of their rendezvous in a house unknown to me left me in a state of shock. I found it difficult to fathom the janitor's conduct and earnestly wished I could have taken some form of retribution against him.
She inquired as to Ruby's whereabouts, and I replied that she was with her parents. She inquired for directions to Ruby's parents' house before departing, reassuring me that her sole intentions were to speak with Ruby and tell her the truth. The woman also said I was a great father to my kid, who was still seated at the table.
I feel depressed and betrayed as I watched her go. However, as a man, I understood the need to muster my strength for the sake of my son and proceed with the divorce. The hidden truth began to unravel. It emerged that my wife, Ruby, had become ensnared in a disturbing game, orchestrated by the janitor and his associates. They had been tallying up the number of married women they seduced within just 60 days. The janitor claimed Ruby as his third conquest. even boasting about a fourth woman he coerced on the same night he was supposed to be spending time with his children. Heights of my revulsion and anger grew as I learned about their repugnant behavior. The mentioned house was, in fact, a rented location where the men brought the women they were involved with.
When the janitor's wife discovered the truth, he returned home in a state of intoxication, tearfully confessing everything in an attempt to reconcile. In a surprising turn of events, Ruby was shocked when she learned about the situation, and the janitor's wife confronted her. She shared her observation, me feeding our son all alone as Ruby was being self-centered and unwise. Ruby completely lost her composure and began sobbing as the janitor's wife turned and walked away.
My in-laws, upon hearing the sound of the car driving away, rushed to check on her. They found her in a near-fainting state. As they brought her indoors, they contemplated taking her to the emergency room when she suddenly started to ramble incoherently. My father-in-law suspected that she might be under the influence of a stimulant or something similar. He was deeply wounded by the entire ordeal, as he was a decent man who didn't deserve to see his daughter betray her husband. In contrast, my mother-in-law, as she often did, placed blame on me for the entire situation. I had no fondness for my mother-in-law and was relieved to have her out of my life. Facing a challenging situation, I understood my responsibility as a father. But despite the pain and anger I felt, there was a sense of relief in discovering the truth. This revelation marked the beginning of my journey towards healing and moving forward from the betrayal I had endured. Later that day, I received a call from Ruby's father. He told me that he feared for her safety and that she remained unconscious. She hadn't had a shower in days and wasn't eating much, and then had the audacity to request that I visit her. It was hard to believe he would ask that, but honestly, I had no desire to see her at all. Following her betrayal, infidelity, and the destruction of my trust, I've reached my limit. I can't muster even a trace of sympathy for her. She's responsible for her own actions, and now she must face the consequences. Without hesitation, I firmly declined his request. I have absolutely no intention of reconnecting with her or becoming entangled in her problems again. I advised Ruby's father to seek assistance for her, with the promise that once she had taken steps to improve her situation, I would be open to allowing her to have contact with our son. It was a challenging choice to make, but I understood the necessity of putting our son's welfare first. I remained hopeful that Ruby would access the support required, and that in the future, we could establish a cooperative and healthy co-parenting relationship for the sake of our child. However, for the time being, my priority was to concentrate on my own personal and emotional well-being as I moved forward. While I was busy with my own life, Ruby called and expressed her desire to meet our son. I questioned her about her emotional stability to ensure it wouldn't distress him, and she assured me that she's okay. I scheduled a meeting for Saturday at 10 a.m. in the park, but I firmly insisted that my mother accompany me. I did not want to meet Ruby alone. The moment I laid eyes on her, I recognized the prudence in restricting their interaction to a mere 3 hours. She appeared disheveled and her face devoid of makeup. Subtly to the familiar essence of femininity that had always been her signature was conspicuously absent, instead by the fragrance of soap. The cruelty. It was only later that I discovered her mother had taken care of her bathing and dressing because she was unable to function properly. For 4 weeks straight, we maintained our meetings in the park, gradually extending the durations to 5 hours, even including Sundays. While it was evident that she was making progress with each passing week, I remained apprehensive about her mental state. Consequently, I hesitated to allow her to spend time alone with him. Spend time alone with our son or permit overnight visits. It was during this time that my mother-in-law, worried by this arrangement, decided to take legal action and hired a lawyer to pursue custody. Nevertheless, Ruby had not yet signed the divorce papers, and I was content with that, as it allowed me to initiate divorce proceedings in 6 months. However, I was greatly upset by her custody lawsuit, as she sought full custody. At Prezi's and I had previously communicated to her father my willingness to eventually share custody evenly, but her mother had dismissed this notion. In response, I counteracted by pursuing full custody, citing mental incapacity as the basis. The hearing commenced and I took my place in the courtroom, my heart racing within my chest. On the other side, Ruby remained composed, with her attorney by her side. It was difficult to fathom that we were engaged in this custody battle for our son. Just a year ago, we had been a content-united family, or at least that's what I had believed. Now everything had shifted.
She spoke of Ruby's deep maternal love and how her parental rights had been unjustly restricted. The lawyer emphasized that Ruby had actively worked on enhancing her mental well-being and was fully dedicated to our son's welfare. Her plea to the court was for Ruby to be granted complete custody of our child.
My attorney rose to address the court, skillfully rebutting her arguments. He articulated my deep apprehensions regarding Ruby's mental well-being, supporting them with compelling evidence that indicated her ongoing struggle with her condition, potentially raising doubt about her suitability for full-time child care. He formally petitioned the court to award me sole custody of our son.
After attentively hearing both parties, the judge decided to call for a recess to deliberate on his judgment. As I exited the courtroom, a rush of overwhelming anxiety consumed me. Still leaning against the wall, I made an attempt to regain my composure.
It was during this moment of unease that Ruby's father, who had consistently been a source of support, approached me. William, can we have a conversation?
I nodded in agreement and we stepped outside. Ruby's father regarded me with a compassionate expression. I understand how challenging this must be for you, he began, but I want to reassure you that Ruby's situation has significantly improved. She's been actively attending therapy and is on medication now. I only want what's best for our son, but I have reservations about her ability to care for him independently.
Ruby's father offered me support, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. I comprehend your concerns, he acknowledged, but I'm equally aware that Ruby genuinely loves your son and is eager to play a role.
Eager to play a role in his life. Perhaps you could consider establishing a joint custody arrangement, allowing your son to have both parents actively involved. After a brief pause for contemplation, I nodded and replied, "Yes, I think that's a viable option." As we returned to the courtroom, the judge delivered the verdict. He ruled in favor of granting joint custody to both Ruby and me, contingent on Ruby continuing to receive treatment for her mental health condition. Exiting the courtroom, I experienced a wave of relief. I recognized that the road ahead wouldn't be simple, but I was determined to give it my all for the well-being of my son. Gazing up at the sky, I quietly whispered a prayer, hopeful that brighter days were on the horizon.
5 months later, Ruby approached me with a suggestion. What if we move back in together and attempt to mend things?
While I gazed at Ruby in utter astonishment, she persisted in making her case, attempting to rationalize her actions and persuade me to reconsider. However, her words went unheard as a wellspring of anger surged within me, poised to erupt like a volcanic eruption. Without hesitation, I forcefully shut the door in her face. First, I was incredulous at her audacity to appear at my doorstep, considering all the pain she had inflicted upon me. My heart still bore the scars of her actions, and yet she had the gall to propose a rekindling of our relationship. It felt preposterous. Unsure as the door shut, I drew in a deep breath and turned to find Emma standing there, silently witnessing the entire dramatic scene. Absolutely. I've met someone who surpasses expectations by a long shot. Her name is Emma, and she's an absolute dynamo. Our connection was like a dazzling fireworks display. Her eyes exuded empathy and support, filling me with profound gratitude. Emma had been my steadfast anchor during the entire Ruby saga, and I couldn't fathom navigating through it without her by my side. Emma enveloped me in a comforting embrace as I released my frustrations. She provided reassurance, affirming that I had indeed made the correct choice and that I deserved more than someone who had inflicted such deep wounds. Her presence exuded a calming influence, reigniting my resolve to forge ahead and consign the past to history. Seconds in the subsequent days, my attention was dedicated to constructing a future alongside Emma. We invested our moments in crafting lasting memories and embarking on fresh journeys. Emma's radiant positivity and boundless enthusiasm proved contagious. I found myself smiling and laughing more than I had in a long time with her by my side. Gradually, the anguish of Ruby's betrayal ebbed away, allowing the healing process to commence. Meanwhile, Ruby persisted in her attempts to connect with me, but my resolve remained steadfast. I had grown weary of her toxic behavior and was ready to move forward with Emma, leaving the past behind. Somehow for toxic melodrama and unfulfilled promises, she had become a distant memory, a valuable lesson learned and a chapter definitively sealed in my life. With Emma as my companion, I was resolutely moving forward. I had learned that life is too short to dwell in the past, and my determination was now centered on seizing every precious moment with the woman who had captured my heart. At Emma, I had discovered my genuine source of joy, and I was prepared to wholeheartedly embrace the remarkable future that awaited us. Thank you for listening to this story to the end, and if you like it, please support us with a like as well as subscribe to our channel. Write in my comments what you think about the story.